Hey there, Leo Ascendant. This is a forecast taking you from Monday, the 10th of November, right the way through to Sunday, the 16th of November, 2025. Now, if you're like me, you might be kind of wondering what just happened. In this last week, we had just so many different planetary alignments. It was unreal, like exact alignments. And we also had Mars going into Sagittarius, the full moon in Taurus, Venus going into Scorpio, Uranus going back into Taurus. And finally, and this is happening tomorrow, I'm recording this on the day that Uranus went into Taurus, but we've got Mercury going retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius. It's pretty big. And so you might be relieved to hear that in this week ahead, we've only got one exact major planetary alignment, and that is Mercury retrograde in a conjunction to Mars. And so actually, I'm going to dedicate this to Mercury retrograde in a conjunction to Mars and what it really means. You know, I'll include a little bit of the moon, not too much, but, you know, like the moon is going to be moving through Leo, your own sign, into the sign of Virgo and then into the sign of Libra in this week ahead. So I'll definitely tie that in. But what really interests me with this Mercury and Mars conjunction is that there's three of them. Okay, so usually when Mercury conjuncts with Mars, it's just done very, very quickly. You know, it's done within a few days. It comes in and it's done, and then it goes. You know, and so it's a very rapid aspect usually. But it just so happens that we had one on the 20th of October in the sign of Scorpio. I remember doing the forecast for those saying, you know, we're going to be speaking up a lot more passionately at this time. You know, I was talking about the powerful words that we had, transforming words. Well, now it's showing up again, this time because Mercury's going retrograde. It's coming back to meet with Mars through the sign of Sagittarius. And that's going to be exact on the 12th of November. And then we've got another one in January in the sign of Capricorn. So there's a series of three of them going from Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn. So I always, you know, I'm fascinated by planets. If you've watched this channel before, you know I absolutely love patterns and exploring patterns. So to me, there's something kind of special around this, and that's why I'm dedicating this forecast to that. If you're new to this channel, by the way, my name's Louisa. Welcome to Feel Good Astrology. So let's get cracking. Let's bring up the charts now. Now, before I do that, I always like to say thank you to everyone that supports this channel, whether it's historic or, you know, whether you're doing it regularly. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate you. So I've got two charts, and what you'll see, this is where I'm really focusing, just this conjunction here. So at the beginning of the week, you'll see that they're very close together in the early degrees of Sagittarius, and the moon's over here. And then by the end of the week, on the 16th, the moon's made it across this part of the chart, and there's some separation between Mercury retrograde and Mars. So you'll see that they've swapped positions. Mercury's there, and then at the end of the week, Mercury's here and Mars has gone beyond. So you'll also see that at the time, and I have spoken about this in other forecasts, but you'll see that they're both in an opposition to Uranus. And by the end of it, Mars has come out of that opposition with Uranus, which I think is quite helpful. By the way, if you're interested in Mercury and Uranus in the opposition, I've done a dedicated video all about that and a sign by sign forecast. So that's worth listening to. Anyway, when you think about Mars, it's about sort of boundaries, standing strong. He's thrusting, he's pushing. He's assertive, some might say aggressive. You know, he's about action, he's physical. It's about vitality and strength and force. You could even say brute force. You know, in some signs, he's much stronger than others. See, here's the kind of paradox. You know, Mars in Sagittarius will stand for something he believes in, but Sagittarius as a sign can be quite relaxed. You know, it's not as militant as other signs. And so, you know, and also Mercury in Sagittarius isn't that black and white or right and wrong, good and bad and up and down, as maybe Gemini or the other Mercury sign, which is Virgo. You know, the sign of Sagittarius, when Mercury is in Sagittarius, you know, Mercury is a lot more about the storytelling and the context, the spiritual meaning, like meaning versus black and white. It's very different. There's a very sort of different expression of the communication. So yes, Mars in Sagittarius in a conjunction with Mercury in Sagittarius can definitely stand strong for things, but maybe not as militantly as other signs, and maybe without this very strong right and wrong, but more about the story and the context and the meaning and the purpose. I guess quest is a really strong, like that's a good word. Mars and Mercury are on a quest together. And because Mercury's retrograde, it's an internal quest. It's not so externally validated. It's less about what other people think and more about the journey you're going on. And so, yeah, there's spiritual courage, there's a revision, there's bold thinking for sure. But this is awakening your fifth house. Now, the fifth house is, it rules children. It rules all new starts. I guess it's a place where we're birthing new ideas. And so it could be something like a project that you've been working on. It could be a new relationship and the new sort of sexual understanding. The fifth house is also very much about intimacy. And so Mars in the fifth house is usually seen as quite beneficial because it brings a sort of vavavoom to sort of sexual intimacy, and it really raises the game. It really, there's a real quest for intimacy. Now, if you've got children, you might find that your children are very questy and very much fighting for their truth. And so you might find your children are a little bit of an upstart, at this time. But with Mars here, I do think, whatever you're passionate about and whatever you're wanting to enliven and enrich and put some, spark into, it's going to be really beneficial. It's going to really work well. And with Mercury here going retrograde, I think you're rethinking that spark. You're reimagining the potential about your creations. And so I guess this is why I've written this. Like, it's reawakening passion, it's playful, and it's also really creative. An X, like Mercury retrograde, all the retrogrades, I think, are tapping us into stuff that's happened in the past as well. So you might find that an X or an old flame might just suddenly reappear, come back into your life. And also, this is a place of joy. And so you might be really rediscovering what's lifting you up, what you're passionate about, what you're really here for. It's kind of purposeful. And you're not going to want to relive drama too much. Now, as I say that, with the opposition, the ongoing opposition to Uranus, there is a certain amount of drama going on, I would say, because, Uranus in opposition to Mars and Mercury really does bring up quite unusual, strong, chaotic energies. And so if you are starting something new here, it could be new and very surprising, and it could really trigger you quite a bit. But as you can see, by the end of this week, Mars has really moved out of that opposition. And so it's just the Mercury and Uranus that are working against each other. So to me, this is, yes, you might be reliving drama, but it might be the information, it might be the learning that is kind of staggering or making you a bit breathless. It's like there's new information that's coming up for you to process and relive. But not necessarily a lot of the physicality of it that Mars represents. So yeah, this is very stirring. And like I say, if you're in a new relationship and wanting to get very intimate, I think this can be a really stirring week and quite some fun as well. Now, when we add in the moon, so, if I go back to the first image, the moon right at the start is just in the tail end of Cancer, and then it goes into Leo. Now, this is in your first house. And when the moon goes through the first house, we tend to feel a lot more emotional. We wear our heart on our sleeve. And, the moon is going to go into a lovely trine with Mars and also a lovely trine with Uranus. And it's going to emphasize all those new beginnings. You'll be feeling more emotional, more sparkly, more maybe ready for a new emotional context. And so to me, this is a real sort of opening and exciting and enjoyable time. And then by the time we get to Wednesday, when Mercury makes that exact conjunction with with Mars, and the moon is going into the sign of Virgo in the second house, then I think there's some tension. So, by that time, the moon in the second house can bring up some self devaluation. It can bring up some feelings of undeservingness, like, maybe I don't deserve to feel this good. Maybe I don't deserve to enjoy myself as much as I am. It also can show where we might have a tightness or a discomfort around money and earnings, where things don't feel necessarily quite so flowy. Now, the moon on its own doesn't mean that, but in the square to Mars and Mercury, you might find that whatever is new and coming into your life is costing you quite a bit, or is tiring you out, or making you question yourself a little bit. So in particular on the 12th, it's very tight because the moon just goes into Virgo. The moment it goes into Virgo, it's exactly, very within a couple of hours, it's going to be exactly in a square to both Mercury and Mars at the same time. So it's a very challenging day, I would say, Wednesday. But then, things pass, and obviously the moon's going to come out of that tight square, and I think you'll be regaining your composure. And then by the time the 15th comes along, which is Saturday, the moon's going to be going into a completely different sort of condition. In the third house, it's popular. You feel a sense of belonging. It's very, very social. And the moon, once again, is going to, if I go to this part of the chart, you'll see it more clearly. But the moon early on Saturday is going to be connecting in a sextile to Mercury. So there's a lovely sort of generous, free-flowing conversation and a lot of reflection, So I think everything to do with friendships and new beginnings is really highlighted. And then soon after, the moon is going to go into a lovely sextile with Mars. And so if there is some sexual intimacy, that's really highlighted. But anywhere where you're coming out to play, I really think that things are going to go really nicely. Now, the final part that I said I was going to speak of, and that is, the first conjunction between them was in Scorpio. Funnily enough, back to where the retrograde's going back to. So, I mean, that's also telling a story. You really are working something out at the moment. In particular about what you're creating and all of your new starts and where they're leading you to. But this first Mars and Mercury conjunction was in your fourth house, really showing where you were probably coming forwards quite strongly at home, needing to share some truths, really wanting to take action, really powerful words going on at home, and words that were bringing about an action. And so it's interesting because, that was on the 20th of October. Now on the 12th, there's this other exact conjunction, really bringing up a sort of courage to relook at what is bringing you joy and how you might have a better level of intimacy together, or, how you might want to start something. And it could also be like, if you've had big discussions at home, you might be ready to start a family, for instance. There's lots of different ways of interpreting this, but this is about something you're starting, something you're maybe ready to begin and begin with passion. And where this is leading, by the time we get to the 18th of January, so from start to finish, it's pretty much a 2-month process with these 3 steps. By the time we get to the 18th of January, these two are making a conjunction at 26 degrees. And they will be in a lovely trine with Uranus. So that also feels quite interesting because it starts off with sort of like bumpy information and it ends with this feeling of actually we're rebalancing this and we can make this work. So whatever's going on, I think is big. There's some interesting clearing going on for you. So I wonder what's going on for you, and I wonder how that's relating to you right now. Like, drop me a message, let me know. So anyway, that's bringing me to the end of this. And if this really speaks to you and you find this, my pace good, if you find this works for you, then consider joining my membership. There's daily forecasts, Monday to Friday. I do weekly forecasts for love and also money. For all 12 signs, and there's just so much more according to which level you go to, or you might want to work with me on a one-to-one basis. That's also absolutely possible. All you need to do is just invite me to collaborate with you. All of my details are below. You can see the links in the description field, or you can also find them on my channel page. So have a wonderful week ahead. I hope all of these passionate new beginnings are working out beautifully for you, Leo, and hopefully I'll catch up with you real soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.